The rain had already washed the blood away. Almost. Thin crimson streaks still clung stubbornly to the cuff of the stranger's black coat as he stood motionless beneath the flickering bakery sign. Inside, warm yellow lights glowed against steamed windows. Fresh bread, cinnamon, coffee. The comforting scents drifted into the cold New York dawn like an invitation. The man didn't move. He simply stared through the glass. Inside, Isabella Hart lifted another tray of sourdough from the oven, unaware that 6 armed men were searching every street within 5 miles for the stranger standing outside her door. She brushed a strand of dark hair from her face and smiled at the elderly homeless veteran waiting patiently beside the entrance. "Morning, Mr. Ellis. You spoil us too much. I just hate wasting bread." She handed him 2 warm loaves wrapped in brown paper. "You'll share?" He grinned. "I always do." That was Isabella. Every morning before opening the bakery, she quietly gave away whatever had been baked before sunrise. No cameras, no social media, no publicity, just kindness. As Mr. Ellis stepped back into the rain, his eyes caught the stranger standing several feet away. Something felt wrong. The man's tailored black suit screamed wealth. His expensive watch alone could have bought the bakery, yet rain poured over him as though he didn't notice. His face was pale, one hand pressed firmly against his side. Mr. Ellis frowned. "You okay, son?" The stranger didn't answer. Instead, his knees buckled. The crash echoed through the bakery. Isabella looked up just in time to see the man collapse onto the sidewalk. Without thinking, she rushed outside. Oh my God. Rain soaked her apron instantly. The stranger's breathing was shallow. His face was impossibly handsome beneath rain-soaked black hair. Strong jaw, dark lashes, sharp cheekbones. But his lips had already begun turning pale. When she reached for him, he caught her wrist. Fast, too fast for someone barely conscious. His grip wasn't painful. It was instinct. Years of survival. Their eyes met. Cold, gray eyes. Not frightened. Not confused. Calculating. As though deciding whether she was friend or enemy. Then, his hand slowly released hers. His voice was rough. "Don't call." He stopped. Blood stained the pavement beneath him. Isabella's heartbeat quickened. "You've been shot." He closed his eyes. "Leave." "What?" "Walk away." She stared. "You're bleeding." "I know. You need an ambulance." "No." His eyes opened again. If anything, they looked even colder. "If you call anyone, they'll find me." She frowned. "Who?" Silence. Rain hammered the pavement. For a long moment he simply watched her. Then he whispered, "Everyone." Most people would have walked away. Isabella didn't. She wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Can you stand?" "No." "We're trying anyway." He almost smiled. Almost. It vanished before she could be sure. Somehow, she managed to drag him through the bakery's back entrance. The security camera above the front door captured only one image before the rain blurred everything. A plus-size baker helping a wounded stranger disappear inside. That single frame would soon be worth millions of dollars. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and rosemary. The stranger leaned heavily against the stainless steel counter. His expensive jacket hit the floor with a wet thud. Isabella froze. There was no gunshot wound on his chest. Instead, the bullet had torn through his left shoulder. Deep, clean, professional. Whoever shot him knew exactly how to kill. They had simply missed by inches. "I need scissors." He spoke calmly, as though discussing the weather. "You need a hospital." "No, you'll die. Not today." His certainty unsettled her. She swallowed. "I'm calling 911. The stranger reached into his pocket. For one terrifying second, she thought he was reaching for a weapon. Instead, he placed a thick black wallet on the table. Inside, there was enough cash to buy the bakery twice over. "Forget you saw me. I don't want your money. Take it." "No." "Everyone does." She looked directly into his eyes. "I don't." Silence. Something unreadable flickered across his face. He had offered fortunes before. Politicians had accepted. Judges had accepted. Police commissioners had accepted. Nobody ever refused. Until now. 20 minutes later, Isabella sterilized a sewing needle over a gas flame. You've done this before? No. He looked at her. That's reassuring. She laughed despite herself. I watched a YouTube tutorial once. He stared. You watched. Don't judge me. I might. She couldn't explain why. But hearing his dry humor made him seem strangely human. Even dangerous men joked. Apparently. What's your name? He answered immediately. Daniel. I lie. She knew it instantly. But she let it go. My name's Isabella. I know. She blinked. You've seen the bakery sign. Another lie. He had noticed her name stitched into her apron long before she introduced herself. He remembered details. Always. That habit had kept him alive for 20 years. The bullet came free. He never screamed. Not once. His jaw tightened. That was all. She cleaned the wound carefully. You have an unusually high pain tolerance. I've had practice. Military? No. Police? No. She smiled. Secret agent? His lips curved. Barely. Something like that. She rolled her eyes. You're impossible. I've been called worse. She wrapped the bandage around his shoulder. When she finished, he looked at her for several seconds. Longer than necessary. Almost studying her. You aren't afraid. She shrugged. I should be? Probably. You've been polite. I've also lied to you. So have most customers. He actually smiled this time. Small. Brief. Real. And somehow, it transformed his face completely. Outside, 3 black SUVs rolled slowly past the bakery. Dark windows. No license plates. They didn't stop. But every person inside looked toward the shop. Lorenzo saw them through the rain-speckled window. His expression hardened instantly. The warmth disappeared. The dangerous man returned. He quietly stood. You have a back exit? She frowned. What? They're here. Who? They found me. Before she could answer, every light inside the bakery suddenly went out. Darkness. The neighborhood lost power. Or so it seemed. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. No. What? They cut the electricity. A loud knock echoed through the front door. Then another. Slower. Deliberate. Neither of them moved. Another knock. Then, a calm male voice. Miss Hart? Isabella looked toward the front. That's strange. You know him? No. We're from the utility company. Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly. No, you're not. The voice continued. We've had reports of electrical problems. Isabella whispered. There weren't any trucks. There never were. His gaze locked onto hers. Listen carefully. The calm authority in his voice sent a chill through her. If you open that door, they'll kill you. Her breath caught. What? They don't know who you are yet. They're looking for me. He stepped closer. His injured shoulder trembled from blood loss, but his voice never wavered. If they see your face, they'll never let you leave alive. Silence. Another knock, this time harder. Miss Hart? We know you're inside. She looked toward the front door, then back at him. Fear spread slowly across her face. Not because she believed everything he said, but because, for the first time, she realized he wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for her. Outside, one of the SUV doors opened. A polished black shoe stepped into the rain. Then another. More men emerged from the darkness, all carrying umbrellas that concealed what they held beneath. Inside the bakery, Lorenzo quietly reached beneath the stainless steel table. When his hand came back into view, a black handgun rested in his palm. He checked the magazine with practiced precision. Only 4 bullets remained. He looked at Isabella, then toward the front door. His voice became almost a whisper. If they come in, stay behind me. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she believed him. The next knock was softer, almost polite. That frightened Isabella more than if they had started breaking down the door. Lorenzo's eyes never left the entrance. They're patient, he murmured. They believe fear makes people careless. Another voice came from outside. Miss Hart, we're not here to hurt you. Lorenia's shoulders tensed. They know your name now. A chill ran through Isabella. How? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed the kitchen in silence and carefully pulled aside the curtain covering the narrow back window. Rain blurred the alley. Empty. Too empty. They've blocked both exits. You can tell that? I can. His voice remained calm, but she noticed the slight tightening of his jaw. Someone had anticipated exactly where he would run. Someone who knew him well. The front door handle moved. Not violently. Slowly. Testing the lock. Isabella instinctively stepped backward. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Loren. She stopped herself. She had almost called him by the name that suddenly appeared in her mind. Not Daniel. Something about him had never fit that ordinary name. He glanced at her. What? You lied. Yes. Who are you? Silence settled between them. Finally, he looked away. The less you know, the safer you'll be. She folded her arms. I've already hidden you. I know. They already know my name. I know. So stop deciding what's best for me. For the first time since she'd met him, he seemed genuinely surprised. Most people obeyed him. Most people never interrupted him. She had done both within minutes. Outside, the knocking stopped. The silence was somehow worse. A phone vibrated. Not hers. His. Lorenzo stared at the screen. No name. Only one word. Answer. He declined the call. It rang again. Then again. Finally, he answered. He didn't speak first. A smooth, elegant voice drifted through the speaker. Lorenzo. Isabella's eyes widened. Lorenzo. So that was his real name. You've been difficult to find. Lorenzo's expression hardened. What do you want, Vittorio? I'd ask how your shoulder feels, but judging by the amount of blood on the sidewalk, I'd say the answer is obvious. Isabella's heart skipped. Whoever this Vittorio was, he sounded completely relaxed, as though discussing business over dinner. You've surrounded a bakery. Lorenzo's voice remained level. You've become dramatic. A quiet laugh echoed through the phone. No, I've become careful. Pause. Who is she? Lorenzo said nothing. I reviewed the security footage. Interesting woman. She helped you. Another pause. If anyone else had found you first. I'd already know her favorite coffee. Lorenzo's fingers tightened around the phone. Leave her out of this. There it was. The first crack. Tiny. Almost invisible. But Vittorio heard it immediately. So, she matters. The line went dead. Isabella hadn't moved. You never told him my name. I didn't have to. What does that mean? Lorenzo looked toward the front window. They'll have already traced this building. The cameras, the deliveries, the utility records. They'll know everything before sunrise. She laughed nervously. That's impossible. He met her eyes. No, it isn't. For years, Isabella's life had been beautifully predictable. Wake before dawn. Bake bread. Laugh with customers. Donate leftovers. Close at sunset. Read a novel before bed. Now, within a single hour, a stranger had collapsed outside her bakery. Armed men had surrounded her business. Someone she'd never met knew her full name. And the mysterious man she'd saved wasn't simply hiding from criminals. He belonged to a world she had only seen in movies. She should have hated him. Instead, she found herself asking, Are you going to leave? He hesitated. Yes. When? As soon as I know you're safe. She frowned. You barely know me. His answer came quietly. I know enough. A sudden crash echoed from the front of the bakery. Glass shattered. Isabella flinched. Lorenzo immediately stepped between her and the sound. Not dramatically. Not heroically. Instinctively. The movement was so natural that it almost seemed unconscious. Another crash. Someone had thrown a brick through the front window. Rain swept inside. Wrapped around the brick was a small white envelope. Lorenzo retrieved it before Isabella could. Inside, one photograph, nothing else. He stared at it for several long seconds. His expression became unreadable. "What is it?" He didn't answer. She reached for the picture. It showed. Here, walking home 3 nights earlier. Another, closing the bakery. Another, reading beside her apartment window. Dozens of photographs, taken without her knowledge. Some from across the street, some from rooftops. Some close enough to capture tears she hadn't realized anyone had seen. At the bottom, 3 handwritten words. "We see everything." Her hands began trembling. Someone followed me? For weeks. Lorenzo's voice was almost emotionless. "They weren't watching you. They were waiting. For what? For me?" She sat down heavily. Nothing about her ordinary life suddenly felt ordinary anymore. Every familiar street, every customer, every evening walk now carried a question she had never needed to ask before. Who had been watching? Lorenzo crouched in front of her, not close enough to touch, just close enough that she could see the exhaustion hidden behind his gray eyes. "I'm sorry." She looked at him. The words surprised her. "You didn't do this. I brought it to your door." His gaze dropped briefly. "I should never have walked inside." Silence lingered. Then she asked the question neither of them wanted answered. "If you disappear, will they stop?" He didn't respond. She already understood. No, they wouldn't, because now she knew too much. Rain continued tapping against the broken window. The bakery felt colder. Smaller. Lorenzo slowly stood. "I have someone." She looked up. "What?" "Someone I trust." "You trust people?" "Very few." He reached for his phone again. After a long pause, he made a single call. A woman answered immediately. "Lorenzo, I need a favor." "No, you need a miracle." "I'll settle for a favor." The woman sighed. "Location?" He glanced around the bakery, then gave the address. Silence followed. Finally she spoke. "If I'm coming, it means everything has already gone wrong." "It has." "Is she alive?" "Yes." Another pause. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. The call ended. "You trust her?" Isabella asked. "With my life. And mine?" Lorenzo looked directly into her eyes. "That's why I called." Those words settled heavily between them. Not romantic. Not yet. Simply honest. For the first time since dawn, Isabella noticed how tired he looked. His face remained composed, but fatigue lingered beneath the surface. His injured shoulder had begun bleeding through the fresh bandage. "You need to sit." "I'm fine." "No." She pointed toward a chair. "You're impossible." A faint smile appeared. "So I've been told." She carefully replaced the bandage. This time, neither of them spoke. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable. Outside, sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. Not approaching. Passing by, New York continued waking up. People hurried to work. Coffee shops opened. Subways filled. Completely unaware that inside one small neighborhood bakery, 2 strangers sat only a few feet apart, their lives now permanently intertwined. Headlights swept across the rain-soaked windows. One vehicle, not an SUV, a dark gray sedan. It stopped quietly at the curb. A woman stepped out holding a black umbrella. She wore a tailored charcoal coat and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to walking into dangerous situations. She looked no older than 35. No visible weapon. No bodyguards. Just calm eyes scanning the street. Lorenzo finally exhaled. "She's here." "Who is she?" Isabella whispered. "The only person left. Who still tells me when I'm wrong." The woman approached the broken bakery window, her gaze briefly meeting Isabella's before settling on Lorenzo. She looked at the blood on his shoulder, then at the photographs scattered across the floor. Her expression darkened. Without greeting him, she said quietly, "You've made this woman's life impossible." Lorenzo lowered his eyes. "I know." The woman stepped inside. She offered Isabella a reassuring smile. "My name is Elena. I'm not here to frighten you." She paused, then added with quiet honesty, "But if you stay here, the people outside won't stop." As thunder rolled over the city, Isabella looked around the little bakery she had built with years of hard work. The ovens, the shelves, the handwritten menu, the warm place that had always felt like home. For the first time, she realized she might have to leave it behind. And somewhere beyond the rain, Vittorio Romano watched from inside a black SUV, a faint smile crossing his face. Because the first move in his game had worked exactly as planned. Lightning cracked across the Brooklyn skyline. For a split second, the entire bakery glowed white. Then darkness reclaimed it. Elena quietly closed the broken front door as rain continued to seep through the shattered glass. She studied Isabella for only a moment. Fear, confusion, disbelief. All perfectly understandable. But beneath all of it, she saw something else. Resolve. You haven't run, Elena said softly. Most people would. Isabella let out a shaky breath. I've been trying to decide if that's bravery or stupidity. Elena almost smiled. With Lorenzo. Sometimes they're the same thing. Across the room, Lorenzo was already examining the photographs Vittorio's men had left behind. He laid every picture across the morning, afternoon, evening, different days, different clothes, different weather. Whoever had followed Isabella hadn't done it for hours. They had done it for weeks. His jaw tightened. They were mapping her routine. Elena looked over his shoulder. Not just hers. She pointed toward one photograph taken from across the street. The reflection in a parked car window revealed another figure. Watching the photographer, Lorenzo noticed it instantly. Someone was watching the watchers. Elena nodded. So we're missing another player. Outside, Vittorio Romano remained inside the back seat of a black sedan parked half a block away. Rain slid down the tinted windows. He never looked toward the bakery. He didn't need to. A tablet rested on his lap. Live security feeds. Traffic cameras. Building rooftops. Every movement around Isabella's bakery appeared on his screen. One of his men leaned through the open door. Boss. The woman didn't leave. I expected that. And DeLuca? Vittorio smiled faintly. He never abandons innocent people. That's always been his weakness. The man hesitated. Should we move now? No. Vittorio closed the tablet. If you corner a wolf, it fights. If you make it protect someone, it exposes its heart. Inside the bakery, Elena carefully gathered the photographs into a neat stack. Pack one bag. Isabella looked at her. I can't just leave. You can. My bakery. It's a building. My customers. They'll survive. My life is here. Elena's voice softened. And if you stay, you may not be. Silence filled the room. Isabella looked around. The handwritten menu hanging beside the espresso machine. The old family recipe book resting on the shelf. The warm brick oven her grandfather had built with his own hands. Every corner carried a memory. Leaving felt impossible, yet staying suddenly felt even harder. Lorenzo walked toward the office in the back. When he returned, he placed something on the counter. A small brass key. What is this? A safety deposit box. You have one? I had many. This one is different. He slid it closer. If anything happens to me, I don't want it. You may need it. She pushed it back. I don't even know you. His gray eyes lingered on hers. No, you only know the man who collapsed outside your bakery. For the first time, his voice carried something almost resembling regret. The rest of me, I wish you'd never met. A loud engine roared outside. All three froze. Not another black SUV. A delivery truck. It slowed in front of the bakery, then stopped. The driver climbed down carrying a cardboard box. He wore the uniform of a local bakery supplier. Isabella frowned. That's strange. I canceled today's order. The driver walked calmly toward the entrance. Cardboard box in one hand, clipboard in the other. Elena's expression changed immediately. Don't move. What? The shoes. Isabella blinked. What about them? Brand new. She frowned. So? A real delivery driver working 12-hour shifts. Doesn't have polished Italian leather shoes. The man knocked politely. Delivery for Hart Bakery. Nobody answered. He knocked again, louder, then, very slowly. He reached beneath the cardboard box. Lorenzo moved without hesitation. He grabbed Isabella's wrist and pulled her behind the heavy brick oven. The next second, glass exploded inward. The cardboard box crashed through the broken window, skidding across the floor. Instead of bread, a phone, it rang once, twice, 3 times. No one touched it. Finally, Elena picked it up using a kitchen towel. Speaker mode. Vittorio's calm voice filled the bakery. "Good morning." No one answered. "I admire your restraint." His tone remained almost friendly. "Ms. Hart, I'm beginning to think you don't like me." Isabella stared at the phone in silence. Vittorio continued. "I have a simple offer. You walk outside, you come home, and no one else gets hurt." Lorenzo stepped forward. "She isn't yours." "No," Vittorio replied, "but she's standing beside something that is." A pause. Then another sentence. "Quiet, measured, terrifying. The betrayal inside your organization started because of her father." The bakery fell completely silent. Isabella frowned. "My father? He's been dead for 15 years. So you've been told." The line went dead. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Isabella slowly turned toward Lorenzo. What did he mean? "I don't know. Don't lead to me. I'm not." "You recognize something." Lorenzo looked away. That was answer enough. She stepped closer. "You know something about my family. I know a name. My father wasn't involved with criminals." "I hope you're right." Hope, not certainty. That single word shattered the last fragile certainty Isabella had left. Elena quietly picked up the old recipe book from the shelf. Something caught her eye. Inside the front cover, a faded photograph. A much younger Isabella sitting beside an older man. Her father, standing behind them, almost hidden by the edge of the picture, was another man, tall, dark-haired, his face partly obscured. Elena stared for several seconds. "Lorenzo." He looked over. Recognition flashed across his face. "Impossible. It can't be." "What?" Lorenzo took the photograph. His breathing slowed. "I know this man." Isabella looked between them. "Who is he?" Lorenzo's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "My father." Everything seemed to stop. The rain, the thunder, even Isabella's heartbeat. She looked at the old photograph again. 2 fathers, standing only inches apart, smiling, neither looking like enemies, neither looking like strangers. My father never mentioned him. He couldn't. Why? Because 20 years ago, Lorenzo stared at the faded image. They disappeared from each other's lives overnight. He turned the photograph over. Something had been written in fading blue ink. "Promise me we'll keep them safe. No names, no date, just those 6 words." Elena slowly exhaled. "This isn't random anymore." "No," Lorenzo agreed. "It never was." He finally understood why Vittorio had chosen a tiny neighborhood bakery instead of attacking him directly. Why Isabella had been watched long before Lorenzo arrived. Why someone had spent weeks studying her every movement. He hadn't brought danger into her life. The danger had been waiting for both of them all along. Outside, another flash of lightning illuminated the rain-soaked street. Across the road, Vittorio stood beneath a black umbrella. For the first time that morning, he looked directly through the bakery window, straight at Isabella. Then, with the faintest smile, he raised one gloved hand, not in greeting, in recognition, as though confirming that the game he had waited decades to finish had finally begun. The moment Vittorio lowered his hand, he disappeared into the rain. Not hurriedly, not like a man escaping, like a man who knew he had already planted exactly what he wanted. Doubt. Lorenzo watched the empty street for several seconds before pulling the curtain closed. "He wanted us to see him," Elena said quietly. "Yes, and he wanted Isabella to believe her past is connected to yours." Lorenzo looked at the faded photograph again. "It is." He hated admitting it, because if Vittorio was telling even half the truth, none of this had begun outside the bakery. It had begun decades earlier. The silence was broken by the soft chime above the bakery door. Not a customer, just the wind. Isabella stood motionless near the counter, still holding the old photograph. Her father's smile seemed different now, not because the picture had changed, because she had. Every childhood memory suddenly felt uncertain. My father was an accountant, she whispered. He came home every night. He coached my Little League games. He built birthday cakes with me. Her voice trembled. He wasn't. She couldn't finish the sentence. Lorenzo stepped closer but stopped several feet away. He knew better than to invade her space. I don't believe he was the man Vittorio wants you to imagine. She looked up. But you think he was hiding something? He answered honestly. I think he was protecting someone. Elena zipped Isabella's overnight bag. Whatever happened 20 years ago, we're not going to solve it standing here. She handed Isabella a clean sweater from the bedroom upstairs. Change into this. I don't want to leave. I know. But right now, your bakery isn't the safest place in New York. Isabella's eyes wandered across the room. The handwritten chalkboard menu. The flour scattered across the work table. The cinnamon rolls cooling by the window. A life built one ordinary morning at a time. She reached over and gently covered the bread with a clean linen cloth. I'll come back. It sounded less like a promise to Elena, more like one to herself. The rain eased into a light drizzle as the three of them slipped through the narrow alley behind the bakery. No flashing lights. No shouting. Only the distant rumble of traffic waking with the city. Elena's sedan waited beneath a rusted fire escape. She opened the passenger door for Isabella, head down. Isabella hesitated. What about Lorenzo? I'll drive. Lorenzo quietly took the back seat. He looked less like the powerful man everyone feared, and more like someone who had gone days without sleep. The shoulder wound was beginning to stiffen again. Elena noticed. You need a doctor. I need answers first. You always say that, and you're always wrong. He almost smiled. So I've been told. The car merged into morning traffic. For nearly 10 minutes, nobody spoke. Brooklyn slowly disappeared behind them. Coffee shops filled. Joggers crossed intersections. Children waited for school buses. The ordinary rhythm of life continued untouched. Isabella watched it through rain-speckled glass. Yesterday, she had belonged to that world. Today, she wasn't sure where she belonged. A small vibration broke the silence. Elena glanced at the dashboard. Someone had sent an encrypted message. She opened it. Only 3 words appeared. The archive survived. Lorenzo leaned forward. Who sent it? No signature. But the encryption belongs to someone we thought was dead. His expression changed. Not relief. Hope. The rarest emotion Isabella had seen on his face. What archive? She asked. Lorenzo looked out the window before answering. Years ago, people collected evidence against several powerful criminal organizations. They believed the truth would eventually matter. They hid everything. The names, the accounts, the victims, the people responsible. And then, the archive disappeared. So did everyone protecting it. Elena looked at him in the rearview mirror. Maybe not everyone. The sedan entered a quiet waterfront district where abandoned warehouses overlooked the gray river. One brick building still showed a faded sign, Mercer Shipping.co. It looked forgotten. Inside, however, warm lights glowed. A woman in her 60s unlocked the door before they even knocked. She studied Lorenzo's bandaged shoulder. You look terrible. I've looked worse. You always say that. And I'm usually right. She rolled her eyes. Come inside. The warehouse had been transformed into something unexpected. Bookshelves, maps, old photographs, boxes carefully labeled with dates. It felt less like a hideout, and more like a forgotten library. Isabella slowly turned in place. What is this? The older woman smiled gently. A place where history waits for brave people. My name is Margaret. I've been keeping records for a very long time. She noticed the photograph in Isabella's hand. Her expression immediately softened. You have Thomas Hart's picture. Isabella froze. You knew my father? Margaret nodded. He used to bring you here. I've never been here. You were too young to remember. Margaret disappeared into another room and returned carrying a weathered wooden box. She placed it carefully on the table. I promised your father I would never open this, unless you came looking. Isabella stared at it. My father left this? He said one day you would need the truth. Her hand shook as she lifted the lid. Inside, a tiny pink ballet shoe, a faded birthday card addressed to Bella, and beneath them, a sealed envelope, across the front, written in careful handwriting, for Isabella. When she is finally safe, tears filled her eyes. That's his handwriting. She traced the letters with trembling fingers. Lorenzo quietly stepped back, giving her space. This wasn't his moment. It belonged to her. She broke the seal. The paper inside had yellowed with age. Her father's voice seemed to come alive through the words. My sweet Bella, if you're reading this, then the promise your mother and I made has finally caught up with you. There are people who build their lives through fear. Never become one of them. If a man ever tells you that violence is the only answer, walk away. If another man risks everything so that others can live without fear, listen to him. The bravest people I've ever known were not the ones who carried weapons. They were the ones who chose compassion when hatred would have been easier. Isabella lowered the letter. The room had gone completely silent. She looked toward Lorenzo. His gray eyes remained fixed on the floor. He had heard every word, especially the last ones. Margaret placed another photograph beside the letter. This one was clearer. Two young fathers, Thomas Hart, Antonio DeLuca, standing together outside a neighborhood bakery almost identical to Isabella's, each holding a laughing little child. One was Isabella. The other, a dark-haired little boy with serious gray eyes, Lorenzo. They knew each other, Isabella whispered. They were friends. Margaret nodded. They dreamed their children would grow up in a better world. What happened? Margaret's smile faded. Fear. People who profit from fear destroyed many good lives. She looked toward Lorenzo. But they failed to destroy every promise. For the first time since collapsing outside the bakery, Lorenzo met Isabella's eyes without walls between them. I can't change where I came from. His voice was quiet, but I can choose where my life ends. She searched his face. There was no demand, no command, only honesty. The dangerous stranger she had dragged out of the rain was still there, but so was the man who had refused to leave until she was safe. She stepped closer, not enough to touch him, just enough that neither of them had to raise their voices. My father believed people could change. A long silence passed. I'd like to believe that too. Something softened in Lorenzo's expression. Not triumph, relief, as though someone had finally opened a window in a room he had lived inside for years. Outside, rain clouds slowly parted. For the first time that morning, sunlight broke across the river. Inside the old warehouse, Isabella carefully folded her father's letter and returned it to the wooden box. She wasn't ready to forgive the past. She wasn't ready to trust the future. But she had taken the first step toward both. Across the city, Vittorio Romano stood at the window of his penthouse, watching the same sunlight break through the storm. He smiled to himself. The game has changed, he murmured. Good, because the most dangerous battles were never fought for power. They were fought for the truth. And for the first time in 20 years, the truth had begun to surface. Morning light slowly spread across the old warehouse, replacing the cold gray of the storm with a quiet golden glow. For the first time in years, Lorenzo DeLuca wasn't thinking about territory, or revenge, or power. He was thinking about a handwritten letter. A father who had believed compassion could outlive violence, and a woman who had refused his money, treated his wound, and somehow reminded him that there was still a world beyond fear. Across the room, Isabella carefully closed the wooden box. She held it against her chest for several seconds before looking toward Margaret. Did my father ever tell you why he never explained any of this? Margaret's eyes softened. He wanted you to grow up without carrying someone else's war. He believed children deserved ordinary lives. A faint smile crossed Isabella's face. He succeeded. Then her smile faded. Until yesterday, Elena entered from another room carrying a tablet. I've been reviewing the surveillance footage around the bakery. She stopped beside Lorenzo. They didn't destroy it. They didn't? No. They searched. Lorenzo looked up. They were looking for something. Margaret slowly nodded. They always have been. She walked toward an old bookshelf and removed a leather-bound journal. Inside were newspaper clippings from 20 years earlier. One headline immediately caught Isabella's attention. Local bakers help expose corrupt shipping company. The accompanying photograph showed Thomas Hart standing beside Antonio DeLuca. Neither man looked wealthy. Neither looked dangerous. They looked like neighbors, friends. Margaret traced the edge of the article with one finger. They weren't criminals. They were witnesses. 20 years earlier, both men had accidentally uncovered evidence that a legitimate shipping company was being used to move kidnapped children across state lines. Instead of selling the information, instead of accepting bribes, they copied every document they could find. Thomas hid the evidence. Antonio tried to protect the families involved. Before they could go to federal authorities, the organization discovered what they had done. Everything changed overnight. Antonio disappeared into the criminal underworld, believing he could destroy the organization from within. Thomas vanished from public life to protect Isabella. Neither man ever stopped trying to finish what they had started. Silence settled over the room. Lorenzo finally understood why his father had seemed so distant during the last years of his life. Not because he had chosen violence, because he had been trapped by it. "I spent years believing my father wanted this life," Lorenzo said quietly. Margaret shook her head. "He wanted you to survive long enough to escape it." Those words struck harder than any bullet ever had. A notification sounded from Elena's tablet. She frowned. "Someone's outside." Everyone turned. The security camera showed a single black sedan stopping at the end of the street. No convoy, no armed escort. Only one man stepping out. Vittorio Romano. He stood alone beneath the morning sun, hands visible. No umbrella, no weapon. "I'll go," Lorenzo said. "No." Elena stepped in front of him. "It could be a trap. It probably is." He looked toward Isabella. But some traps only end when someone refuses to keep playing. The warehouse door opened. A cool breeze drifted inside. Vittorio remained several yards away. "You look terrible," he said with a faint smile. Lorenzo answered calmly, "You've said worse." "I have." For a long moment, neither man moved. Finally, Vittorio reached into his coat. Elena instinctively tensed. Instead of a weapon, he removed a thick envelope. He placed it on the hood of the sedan. "The originals." Lorenzo didn't approach. "What is this?" "The evidence your father died protecting. You could have destroyed it. I could have. Why didn't you?" Vittorio looked toward the river. "Because fear kept me alive." His expression became unexpectedly weary, but it never let me sleep. The silence stretched. Then he took one step backward. "What happens next isn't my decision anymore." He turned, climbed into the sedan, and drove away without another word. No dramatic chase followed. No final gunfight. Only the sound of tires disappearing into the distance. Inside the envelope were original shipping manifests, financial ledgers, and sworn statements that had never reached investigators. Enough evidence to expose the network Thomas Hart and Antonio DeLuca had risked everything to stop. Margaret carefully closed the folder. They finally finished what they started. Lorenzo looked at Isabella. "My father believed the truth mattered. So did yours." She nodded. They were right. Weeks later, the little bakery reopened. The broken window had been replaced. Fresh flowers rested on every table. The familiar scent of warm sourdough once again filled the room. Neighbors returned. Children laughed. Mr. Ellis stopped by every morning for his usual loaf of bread. To everyone else, life looked ordinary again. But Isabella had changed. Not because she had become fearless, because she had learned courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing kindness despite it. One rainy morning, just before opening, she noticed a familiar figure standing outside beneath the bakery sign. No blood, no wound, no storm in his eyes, only a man holding a small paper bag. She opened the door. "You know," she said with a smile, "most customers come inside. I wasn't sure I was invited. She laughed. You saved my bread from getting cold. He handed her the bag. Inside was a tiny wooden plaque, hand-carved. Sample. It read, Hart and DeLuca Community Bakery. Beneath it, in smaller letters, every loaf shared is a promise kept. Isabella looked up. You made this? I had help. It isn't very expensive. No, it's better. She smiled through tears. I think my dad would have liked it. So would mine. Together they hung the sign above the counter, not as a monument to the past, but as a reminder that two ordinary fathers had once believed kindness could outlast fear. Outside, rain began falling again. This time, neither of them hurried indoors. They simply stood beneath the bakery awning, watching people cross the street with umbrellas and coffee cups, the city moving forward around them. Lorenzo finally broke the silence. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. Isabella looked at the warm lights glowing through the bakery window. I don't either. She met his eyes. But tomorrow doesn't have to look like yesterday. For the first time in many years, Lorenzo believed that was possible. He wasn't healed. Neither was she. But healing had begun. And sometimes, the strongest love story isn't about two people saving each other. It's about two people choosing, day after day, to build a life where no one else has to be saved.